Well, if you know Charlie Brumfield, you probably know of me. But I have so many stories, and such a incredible experience, probably the most experience playing wise of anybody that's ever played racquetball with Charlie. I think I've got that. The very first time I ever met Charlie was in 1969, and I was 11 years old. That was just yesterday. And I was on the court hitting the ball. The Nationals were in town, all the great players were there, and somebody must have said, oh, there's a junior player, why don't you go down and show him a couple things. And that was exactly the way a lot of the players were in the very beginning of racquetball. They were very helpful to juniors or people or instruction. I just remember all the players, all the pro players teaching, anybody or, anything they ever wanted to know about racquetball, and then all the clinics we had at all the tournaments. But Charlie came on the court with me, and I was constantly hitting the ball, and it was hitting the side wall and hitting the front wall. Hitting the side wall, hitting the front wall, almost like a pin shot. And Charlie came onto the court, and I never met him, but I knew who he was. And all I remember him saying is, what you have to do to get better is you have to hit the ball straight in. Hit the ball straight in, front wall, have it come right down the wall. Don't hit the side wall. And I said, okay, I will practice that. I will practice that. And then he left the court, and this is the honest to God truth. And you walk down the corridor and you walk up the stairs to the court. And he looked over the top, and there I was, hitting the ball, hitting the side wall, and then hitting the front wall. And when I say that, I say that out of a real long story. When you talk about smarts in racquetball and who were the smart players, there was never anybody even remotely close to Charlie. Never. Nobody. All the past greats, they were great in their own way. But Charlie, in my opinion, when I heard him talk about other players and what they could do, the other top pros, he had analytics before analytics was analytics on players. And what happened is that when he played, while he, exactly like what you said, he may not have had the most athletic ability, but what he didn't have, he made up in smarts. And he would figure out a way to beat you. Well, not only would he figure out a way to beat you, but he would also know what your abilities were, what you could do before you did it. So his knowledge and his breakdown of players was, to me, was unbelievable. And as I kind of progressed, and let me just say this also about Charlie. Charlie was like an unreachable kind of individual to kind of like beat or conquer, because Charlie Brumfield never had a rival until I arrived on the scene. He never did. Does the hammer and the nail have a rival? No, he beat everybody he played, and a lot of the top pros, when he really tried, when he put out 100%, beat them extremely bad. So he never really had a rival until some kind of a new game style was created, which came about with me. And how it happened, it wasn't a planned thing, it was just the way all of us played back in St. Louis. And one summer I put on 15 pounds and grew 3 inches, and I was starting to hit the ball just a lot harder and controlling it, and just magic kind of happened for me. And so when I all of a sudden was starting to come onto the scene, Charlie now had to deal with, well, this is a whole different style. Where can I figure this out? Well, how could he figure it out when I couldn't figure it out? I'm the one that's playing, and it was he just was so amazing as to how much thought he put in to his game and everybody else's. He knew everybody else so much better. than they even knew themselves. He knew what their capabilities were no matter where they stood on the court. And he beat players that were so athletically, so much, there was no comparison. But then again, there was no comparison to the mental part and the smarts of of the way he played and stuff. A lot of people ask me, you know, like, boy, how did you get so good? You know, how did you just learn to win or become a champion or whatever? And what a lot of people don't know is if I could beat Charlie Brumfield, there was going to be nobody that was going to be able to deal with me at the time. And how competitive he was. And Rich Wagner will come up here and tell a couple stories, and I mentioned it to him a little bit earlier and stuff. One of the most memorable matches I ever saw was when he played Charlie in Florida. And I would tell you this about Charlie Brumfield. He valued winning and being a champion more than any racquetball player ever, and wasn't remotely close. It was, not only was it valued, it was so important to him. So important. And then when I sort of came onto the scene, and he had to kind of like start to deal with this new kind of wave of this new power game, I think the greatest compliment he ever gave me, that I never really ever told him about, was that he hired Carl Loveday, who was the greatest racquetball coach, bar none. The greatest racquetball mind, along with his, to figure a way out to beat this freaking kid.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
That's exactly. There's a lot of people here that, I mean, you know, I see a lot of faces from the old days that are understanding what I'm saying, but back then, he just had as many eyes on me and on him, and how he could come up with different game styles. And for the longest time, 75 when I started to come on, 76 when I was getting tougher, 77, and then at 78 is when my breakthrough came, to where I was kind of like, we were kind of even, and then about when 78 hit is when I hit my stride, and I started to get levels better than him. And I'll never forget this match in King's Court. And I knew when I was, you know, when you're playing somebody and you're beating them and you know they really can't do too much. I remember a particular match where he came off the court and he couldn't do much against me because I was just, it was just a magical time for me, and I was up by a big amount, I think about 11-3, and he turns to Carl in the corner, not knowing that I was just a couple people over just wiping with a towel, and he goes to Carl and goes, well, what should I do? And Carl in his incredible knowledge said to him, how about trying the front wall? Just hit the front wall, you know? And I remember I almost just lost it and stuff. For the first 5-6 years, I mean, I'm a kid. He's like babysitting me as we're going and we're doing this, but I'm learning from him as to how to handle the media, how to do interviews, how to talk about racquetball. And to me, he always rung out that, you know, racquetball is first. You know, Hogan, you may be great or whatever, but racquetball comes first. And he was an incredible promoter, incredible with, I mean, would engage the crowd, engage people with his personality like nobody else. And I really honestly believe he's the first one to really create such a major character of the sport that drew so much attention to it, along with how great of a player he was. And at that time, I think I was a real good contrast, because I wasn't like the same group of players that was playing. I was considerably younger. I played a totally different style, which really hadn't really connected with everyone. Nobody could kind of like figure it out. I mean, I was the hardest hitting player hardest hitting racquetball player for a number of years, and I remember I was clocked at 142 miles an hour. I mean, nowadays with these big rackets, these kids can hit it behind their head 142 miles an hour. So, but remember, our rackets were almost as big as our palms and stuff. So we toured, and we had so many incredible matches. And getting back to the Rich Wagner match, which sticks out in my mind as one of the 3 or 4 really telling matches of Charlie's career. It was in Florida. It was a real big tournament. It was a very important tournament, and I think it was almost like an elimination tournament for being number 1 at the end of the year or whatever. Maybe Rich remembers the particulars of it, but they had a brutally tough match, real tough. And I think the winner would have gone on to play me in the finals. But after a super long, tough match, Rich won that match. And after that match, Charlie just was so upset by it and whatever, actually walked all the way down a hall into a big room that went into a big gymnasium. I remember a big gymnasium, and walked to the corner of the gymnasium and sat in the corner of it, and literally wouldn't come out of the gym. He was so despondent. I'm sure he was crying. I'm sure it was a brutally tough match. But when I saw that, I just saw somebody that just valued that winning so much that it was like that important to him. So many athletes we see nowadays in all sports, and even racquetball is a very good example of it. You lose, we'll get them next time, whatever, go have a beer, whatever. It was never like that with Charlie. If he lost, it was hard. And I remember he didn't come out of that corner. I remember I went over very briefly with him, and I could see that he was really upset and stuff. There was nothing I was going to say that could help him or anything and stuff like that. And then after about a half hour, I went and got Rich, and I said, Richie, I went with somebody. Maybe I didn't do it all alone, but I went to and I just said, hey, Rich, I said,
Okay, wrap it up.
Okay, you got it. you gotta go talk to him. So he did. I know it is long and stuff. But just in closing, I just want you to know, Connor, your sisters, what an incredible racquetball man. I mean, racquetball athlete that he was, and he taught not only me, he taught so many people so much about racquetball and his greatness. Such a great guy, great man. He was always like the guy who I never really ever thought I could really ever beat him. He was just too unreachable. But he taught me a lot. I owe him a lot. And I want to thank you. I want to thank everybody for coming and making this special evening. And I really believe this. The one thing about our sport has fallen on hard times in the history of our sport, is going to be lost. And that means some of the real important people of the sport are going to be forgotten. But there should be the national champion or whatever, the award should be the Charlie Brumfield Award. It should be forever, because that's the kind of contribution this guy made. I'm sorry I'm so long-winded.